Hello, my name is Rafique Patel. I'm the senior partner of Bond Adams Solicitors. Today I'm going to talk about the conveyancing process and two important parts. The first part I'm going to talk about is when you come to sell your property, the items that you need to consider. And in the second part, I'm going to talk about when you're buying a property, what you need to consider. The first part is when you decide to value your property. Are you going to use an estate agent to help you, or are you going to try to judge the price for yourself? An estate agent can help you because they may know the local market. They may know the prices that are going for a property of your kind. Also, they may know about commercial property. For example, you might be trying to sell a plot of land, and that plot may only be worth, say, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds. But when you get planning permission, it may be worth a lot more. So an estate agent, whether it's a commercial property agent or a surveyor or an estate agent in residential, will be able to help you. Now I'm going to talk about the sales and conveyancing process. So the first part is going to be who are the owners of the property. If two people are selling, then as solicitors, we need the identification of all of the sellers. If one seller is absent, that can cause you an issue. The second part is, are there any charges on the property? Are there any restrictions? Who do you owe money to? All that will need to be paid off and removed before you sell your property. So that's what you need to give your solicitor in terms of the sale. The next part is, when can you complete by? Now, you might think that you will simply set a date and that date is going to be fine. But you have to remember that the buyer may have their own dates. The buyer may have a property that they also have to sell, and that is known as a chain. So that means you may not sell for a few months. Never put things in place such as storage and trying to find somewhere else to live before you have a full completion date. So that is known as the chain. I'm now going to talk about the matters you need to consider when you are buying a property. So the first thing I want to tell you is that it's called buyer beware. What that means is you have to search the property and everything about it. The seller does not have to volunteer any information other than certain forms which tell you about disputes or what's going to be inside the property and certain other matters. As far as the structure of the property is concerned, they don't have to tell you very much. You should carry out your own survey if you want to, depending on how old the property is or how valuable the property is. So the next thing you have to do is what are called searches. You have to do a water search to look at the water pipes. Are they joined with any neighbours? You have to do a local authority search to tell you about footpaths, to tell you about any plans that the local authority might have. You also have to carry out an environmental search to see if there's any nearby petrol stations or any other environmental matters. So that is known as the searches stage. The next aspect on investigating the property is items such as planning, building regulations, and things like that. So for example, if a conservatory has been built, if there's been an extension, if there's been an upper floor, you need to check that the planning regulations were obtained when that happened. The second thing you have to check is building regulations, because if you buy a property that does not have that certification, then the value of the property can go down. The next part I'm going to now talk about is the condition of the property, and I touched on this earlier. So as I said, you should look at whether you should carry out a structural survey. A structural survey will tell you whether there are any cracks in the property, whether there's any loose brickwork, whether the chimney has an issue, whether there might be foundation issues, and that's called a structural survey. It can be very expensive and can cost a few £1,000s, but you should look at how old the property is, how valuable the property is, and you might want to consider whether you're going to do any work to the property, and that's a structural survey. The bank, when they're lending you any money, will only carry out a very basic survey to make sure that the property has the value that they're going to lend you on. So that deals with the condition of the property. The next thing I'm going to now talk about is an inspection of the property. Have a general inspection of the property. Go and visit the property. For example, you may not realize that there may be a lot of noise at certain times of the day. There may be a railway line nearby. It may be very busy. There may be a community centre. So go and look at the property and make sure that you are very happy with it if you are going to live there. So that deals with the condition of the property and also other considerations. The final part I'm now going to talk about is when you are ready to complete and the funds. So I spoke earlier about a chain and making sure the two go together. The last thing you want is to sell your property and have nowhere to go. Also, if you're buying a property, the last thing you want is, if you're selling your property as well and using that money, that sale does not go through at the same time. It is a very difficult job for a solicitor to line everything up, to get the money in time, and to deal with that chain in one go. So it's very important that you do not organize any storage or organize anything else until that happens. So what happens from the lender, if you are borrowing money to buy your property, the solicitor will ask for the money from the lending. You must also now give your deposit and the legal fees. On the sale, you then have to line up whether you're having a purchase, and if you're not buying a property and you are only selling, you have to decide where you are going to live. Also, if you are selling and there is a tenant in the property, have you actually arranged for the tenant to move out, or is the tenant going to stay in? What is going to happen to the deposit? Have you had rent more than the completion date? And certain things like that. The final part that I'm now going to discuss is the registration of the property into your name if you are a buyer. If you are a buyer, you've now sent your money over to the seller, you've got the keys, and you've moved into your wonderful home, or you now own a property that you have let out to somebody else. The next part is the registration of the property in your name. If it is a leasehold, it can take up to 6 months. Even if it is a normal registration, it can take up to 3 months. So if you are looking to sell your property, you may have to wait until your property is registered into your name. And that is the end of that video, which deals with the conveyancing process. Thank you.